I mean, look, my issues with the BBC reporting on the Israel conflict goes back a long time. I think they've been letting the side down since the very beginning. I think their attitude is horrific. So when I saw the documentary was coming out, that's where it started. I said, I need to have a look at what they've done here. So the document was aired last Monday, I think, at not like 10 days ago or 11 days ago, 9 o'clock in the evening. So I started looking at the people that were involved almost immediately. And it took me about 3 hours to realize there was something seriously wrong and 5 to actually uncover the Hamas links, which obviously creates the questions. Because if I can do it from my home in North London with just Facebook, where were the BBC?
What are the concerns you've had then, David, over the coverage from the BBC of this issue?
I mean, my issues with the BBC because it's our state broadcaster and we're forced, obviously, to fund it. But the problems are more widespread regarding media coverage of the conflict completely. It's about this issue that it seems to be that media generally seems to think they need to balance out between a liberal democracy and a radical Islamic terror group. And if that's your starting point, then the end point's always going to be flawed. So yes, that's where I'm coming from here.
All right. It's, I would say, a full and candid confession and indeed apology from the BBC. Does it end there now for you, David?
No, it starts. I mean, firstly, there's contradictions within their own position. For example, one of the BBC's key arguments is they don't actually have journalists in Gaza. They say we don't actually have journalists in Gaza, therefore it's impossible. It's a very, very weak position to take. Firstly, they did certainly have journalists in Gaza at the start of the conflict. They flew them out for obvious reasons. Secondly, if the argument is, look, we don't have journalists in Gaza, therefore we don't know exactly what's happening, then why on earth are you producing a documentary? How can you possibly know what's in it? There's contradictions here. So it really is why there is an engine room in the BBC, and there is an engine room in the BBC that is distinctly hostile to Israel, that runs about like a factory trying to find new ways of demonizing Israel and making people sympathize with, well, basically terrorists and the supporters for terrorists. So I think now we need to ask why it was commissioned in the first place, what's going on inside the engine room, how the BBC can get to a point where this took place and they never asked the right questions.
All right. David, well done on the work you've done. Privilege having you on the show. Thank you. David Collier, investigative journalist who first unearthed this, 12 after 8. Let's turn to David Elstein, who was a senior producer at the BBC, went on to be chief executive of Channel 5 and joins me now. David, good to have you on board. So there is no measure that we can turn to, but how embarrassing is this for the BBC in your view? Morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, obviously, it's a bit of a disaster, but at least give them credit for dealing with it reasonably quickly and for the board getting stuck in. And for that, I would probably credit the chair, Samir Shah, who used to be a senior executive in BBC Current Affairs and therefore quickly realised what must have gone wrong for this programme to get to air with so few health warnings surrounding it. But to be fair, again, to the BBC, they were obviously misled by the production company, deliberately misled, repeatedly misled. Now, the BBC commissioning editors were at fault in not following up. And I think David Collins' point is a fair one, which is how do you make any journalism inside Gaza now? Or during a major war, it's obviously going to be, whatever comes out is going to be influenced by Hamas. Hamas control Gaza. So whether explicitly or implicitly, you're going to have Hamas's fingerprints over the material. And although the BBC said they had full editorial control, all they had was control over the editing, not over the input of the content. So what they needed to do day one was, how are you recruiting these teenagers? Have their parents consented? Have their parents got connections with Hamas? Please declare that, and is anyone being paid? Now, if you preface that film with all that information, it's a much easier job for the viewer to make sense of it. Look, the production company could have stuck the film on YouTube and nobody would have cared one way or the other. But the BBC has a reputation to protect, and it did a poor job in this case.
Grateful for your time as ever, David. Thank you. David Elstein was a senior producer with the BBC and went on to be chief executive of Channel 5. Now, the number of you, and you don't have to apologise for being wrong. I'm not that sort of bloke. It doesn't matter that you were wholly wrong, those of you who sought to defend this documentary, with the line that, well, you can't get journalists in, so what choice did they have? That has been. But what I'm interested in, I'm just going through Mr. Lineker's messages. No reference, no backing. Down. Let's try Miriam Margolyes. No back down at all. So, credit where it's due, the BBC have taken it on the chin, as David Collier, I think David Elstein misspoke, David Collier. As David Collier said, credit to them, they accept full responsibility. But what of Gary Lineker? What of Miriam Margolyes? Do you think we might see them change their position? No, me neither. Wonder why. 8:15, LBC News Headlines, Thomas Watts.